Hi guys, this is where things are going to get really interesting because we're now going to create an auto-scaling group. Now, auto-scaling is a way of adding elasticity for our EC2 instances. So we talked about elasticity concepts earlier in the course, and I did briefly mention about auto-scaling. So what it does is it will actually automatically launch and terminate your Amazon EC2 instances, and it can do so to replace instances that have failed, or it can actually react to the amount of pressure that your systems are under. So maybe you monitor the amount of CPU usage on your servers, and if they reach a certain threshold, then you will launch additional instances. So it's a really awesome service, and it's super useful for making our applications scalable and also resilient. So here is a diagram on your screen of an auto-scaling group. So everything in the orange dot here is managed by auto-scaling. So we have 4 EC2 instances. Now we're also integrating with the CloudWatch service, which I mentioned before. That's a performance monitoring service. So these EC2 instances are sending information to CloudWatch and also to EC2 itself. So in this case, something called an EC2 status check has failed. Now that will tell the auto-scaling group that it needs to replace the instance. So it actually does that. It just launches a new instance and replaces it. In another example, a metric is being sent to CloudWatch. So in this example, maybe it's the CPU that's being monitored, and you can say if your aggregate CPU usage across your EC2 instances exceeds 80%, then you know that you're reaching capacity. So the metric will notify CloudWatch of that status. CloudWatch will notify auto-scaling to scale, and auto-scaling will then launch a new instance. So that's how you can have resilience and elasticity. Of course, the reverse can happen as well. So if the metric drops down again and goes below another threshold, maybe 60%, you can say, let's terminate that extra instance because we don't need it anymore, so we don't want to pay for it. So that's how auto-scaling works, and we're going to go into the console now and launch our first auto-scaling group. I'm in the EC2 management console, and on the left here, let's scroll down all the way to the bottom and we can find auto-scaling groups. Now let's click on create an auto-scaling group. I'm going to call this ASG1, and we need to create something called a launch template. So let's click on the create launch template. I'm going to call this LC1 for launch configuration 1, and let's just head down and choose an AMI. And what I want to do is just scroll down until I see that Amazon Linux 2 AMI. And then I'm going to choose an instance type. And again, I'm going to search for t2.micro. So let's take t2 micro. We also need to choose our key pair. So I'm going to choose Sydney-KP. We're going to put it into a VPC. And we're going to specify our web access security group. We can leave the remainder as defaults and click on create launch template, and that's complete. And now let's go back and create our auto scaling group. So it doesn't actually bring me back to where I was, but all I need to do is type in ASG1, and now I can choose my launch configuration. So I've got my launch configuration, and that's basically specifying the parameters for the EC2 instance. So which AMI, which storage configuration do we want, what instance type do we want, what security group, and so on. So you just saw that configured. So we now can keep launching instances using this launch configuration. So let's click on next. We can leave this option selected. We have our default VPC selected, and now we just need to select our subnets. So I'm just going to go through each of these subnets and add them all in so they're all possibilities. I've got 2A, 2B, and 2C. So those are different subnets in different availability zones. Let's click on next. Now there's a couple of types of health checks here, and you can enable load balancing. That's something we're going to do in this section, but not yet. So we just leave the defaults here. And what this is here is it's going to check the health of our EC2 instance using the EC2 status checks. So let's click on next. And now we can specify our group information. So how big do we want our group to be? What do we want our desired capacity? Well, I'm going to specify 3. And then I need to specify the minimum as 2 and the maximum, let's put that as 4. It will now launch 3 instances. We know that we should never go under 2 and we can go up to 4. We could then choose a scaling policy which will dynamically resize the group. We're not going to do that yet, and we're not going to enable scale in protection. Let's just click on next. Click on next. Keep going through, and now we have the review screen. So let's just come down to the end and click create auto scaling group. And that's it. So that will now start launching instances on EC2. And we can see that it's now in the status of updating capacity. And we have this desired capacity of 3. So let's head up to have a look and see if it's actually launching any instances yet. So that just took a couple of refreshes, and now we can see that it is launching 3 instances. So they're all in the state of initializing. So we'll just give those a couple of minutes and I'll pause the recording while they initialize. So that just took a few minutes, and we now have all 3 instances are in the running state, and we can see that their status checks have passed. So you can always look at the status checks as well to see here we have the system reachability check and the instance reachability check, and those have both passed. So these are 3 healthy instances running on AWS. Now if we come down to auto scaling groups, we can click on ASG1, let's click on activity, and we can see the log here that tells us that 3 successful launches took place. So what happens if we have a failure? Well, let's test that out now. So let's come back up, and I'm going to take 2 of these instances and I'm going to choose terminate. So I'm just, manually doing this, but this could have been some kind of failure of your application. Something's going wrong and the system status checks are no longer working. So that means that the auto scaling group is going to notice that has happened, and then it should then react to that state and launch replacement instances. So let's head back down. Let's go to auto scaling groups, click on RSG again, and click on activity. Now there's nothing here yet, but I'm going to refresh, and very soon I think that we'll see a log mentioning that something's happened. So within a couple of minutes, the auto scaling group did notice that something had happened. So we can see it did this termination. So we got a log entry here saying that it had terminated an EC2 instance. And that was terminated in response to an EC2 health check. Well, we know that we did it manually, but anyway, that's what it's saying. It then launched a new EC2 instance in response to a difference between the desired and actual capacity. And then we can see that second instance that we terminated also got logged here, and we can see it's in the process at the moment of launching another instance to replace that one and get us back up to our desired capacity, which should be 3. So if we head back up to instances, we can now see that we've got 3 instances back. Now the last one is the very last one to be launched by the ASG, that's initializing, but one of these was also replacement for the instances that we terminated. So that's to show you how auto scaling group can respond to failures and helps that your application to be more resilient. In the next lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to look at how we can create a policy so that our auto scaling group is going to grow based on actual usage of the CPUs of our instances.